Hello and welcome to this episode of T-Tech. So today we're going to actually be replacing a cooling system on my Thinkpad T61. So this is the symptoms, first of all, that I saw before I decided to do this. So a little background. I had, in this picture, I had VirtualBox running with about two VMs. One was doing a build of a software for me, so compiling it. I had 4 tabs open in Firefox and things of that nature. So with all that, I was running, and I also had FreeBSD on the laptop at this time. I was running 86 degrees centigrade to 87 at full load, and in this case, it wasn't even idling below 50 degrees centigrade. So that is way too hot for the graphics in this particular laptop, as well as the CPU. So I went online and I found myself replacement cooler, fan, basically the entire CPU heatsink fan assembly, and I went ahead and purchased that. And what follows is my little adventure getting that put in there. This is the same laptop that I replaced the motherboard on, but at that time I never redid the cooling. Well, this is what happens, after so long without doing that. You'll start to get, instability. And what actually tipped me off to this was it was powering off with no indication in the BIOS or in the OS as to why. So that's how I figured out that this was happening. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Now, what I used was my normal Pros kit, the same one I used in that video. For all of this, there's nothing special about that. This is how it came for me. And you want to verify that it has the right connector, 3 pin with this one. And make sure to keep the covering on the thermal pads that it comes with. You don't want to get dust or debris on there while you're disassembling this. That's going to affect the cooling in a negative way. So you want to take the battery out as normal, just like that. And you want to focus on the screws here that have these icons. You want to unscrew all of those. And we also want to unscrew the hard drive compartment as well to get it out of our way. And that's about the size screwdriver I used for this. And when you get it out there, that's what the screw is going to look like. But just repeat that process for all the screws that have those icons and an arrow on them. Same thing up here. You do want to take this one out. You don't have to take these out, by the way, the smaller ones. And, just keep looking around, finding the screws of that length. But once you've done it successfully and you have enough of them removed, you'll be able to, on the ThinkPads, there's a bezel here, and you'll be able to start to separate the bezel from the top of it there, from the rest of it. And you'll be able to see, and don't force it, but once it comes out, you'll know you'll have enough disassembled on the back. So just lift that up there, and gently though, because you don't want to damage this cable that connects the ThinkPad and the touchpad and everything. So let's disconnect that, and that's what we did there. You're left with that connector, and that's what it looks like on the other side. And from there, this keyboard lifts up from there, and you'll start to see underneath it. And again, careful on this cable, especially if you've done this many times like myself, because you'll want to do upgrades from time to time, and you don't want to damage the components inside. So just pull that out there and have it disconnected. That's what it looks like. Now, the bezel part that kind of goes around the keyboard and the bottom part, there is screws. I actually was missing one, but So go ahead and take that out though before you try to take the bezel off. But once you take that out, you can get the bezel off of there. And once you've done that, you want to locate the speaker connector for the power and the sound and everything. And as well, this cable here, you can take care of that while you're down here as well. What you want to do is disconnect this cable, and we're also going to want to disconnect this cable, as well as unscrewing the speaker here. So there's that disconnected. Now, do not take off this heat shielding. If you do that, the cable is going to melt, and you're going to have problems because that has to go across the heat sink where it gets very hot. So you don't want to take that shielding off there. So, again, I've just moved the speaker out of the way, and then that's what it's going to look like when you get the cables out of the way of all of that. So you also at this time want to take out the CMOS battery. This keeps the settings in the BIOS when the power is off from AC, and there's no DC or anything coming from the battery. You want to disconnect that though for this. Now you want to take and unthread the Wi-Fi connectors under that clip, and then we want to start working on the the pressure plates basically that hold down the heatsink in different places. There's 2 on this one, and you just want to focus on this one up here. There's one down below with 3 screws, and then the 4 screws that are actually the CPU itself. The rest of those are the South Bridge and the GPU. So you want to just take it off there. Same thing, that's how it looks. And take the bottom one off. There you go. And then when you undo the 4 screws here, you want to undo this one here, and they ever so slightly pop up. There's a little spring in there. You want to undo those. When you tighten these back up as well, you want to do it in an X pattern, kind of like if you're putting a tire back on. You don't want to cinch it down too tight and strip them or damage the CPU. So that's with everything ready to come off for the most part. To get it off there, you kind of have to move it back and forth, pull up on it a little bit. There's no real textbook 101 way I can say to get it off there. Just, move it. You don't want to force it to break anything, but it will come off if you have everything loosened correctly. So that's what it looks like off of there. It does start to actually come up and slide away from the yellow port here. This is the power for DC, for the AC adapter. That slides away from it. And you do want to make sure that you don't have to undo this here for the hinge or for the screen. Don't worry about that. It comes off without that. All right, that's what it looks like with all the screws out and everything and off of the board. And here we are. This is what we're replacing, and you can see why. Now, I did in that video put thermal paste on them. That is an option. I mean, it functioned for the time I uploaded that video till now. But it's actually supposed to have thermal pads. I wasn't aware of that at the time, but it happens. So what actually happened as well before everything is the fan was replaced as well. So, again, that was just replaced separate. Now, I will say, a good analogy I can think of, it's kind of like your car's radiator. Here, this is like replacing the front fan that pulls the air out of the front, that pushes cold air across it. And the copper heat sink is kind of like the fins, so to speak, in that radiator. And the thermal pads and the thermal grease is like the antifreeze, the fluid, the water mixture that goes through there to carry the heat away from the engine. But what's going on here is replacing the fan is kind of like the equivalent of just doing that. But replacing this is like the fins, and then this is like, if you just replace the grease, it's kind of like getting your radiator flushed. Now, all of those together are okay, but sometimes you have to replace the entire radiator. Well, same thing here. If you don't do that, the cooling, in your engine, aka your CPU and your GPU in this case, isn't going to be good, and you're going to have bad things happen. Whether it's an engine or a computer, kind of the same thing. So once we pull that out of there, though, you may want to clean this. It depends. You can get dust and everything in there. You got to clean that up. So from here, though, there's the CPU. I upgraded the CPU in this to do virtualization extensions on there to run VMs better. And that's one of the reasons I love the ThinkPad. You can upgrade the CPU. And you want to clean all this off, by the way, all of it. You want some rubbing alcohol, some Q-tips, and a paper towel, and some elbow grease and some patience. Clean all that nice and clean. Don't skip this part. If you skip this part, you might as well not replace the cooling at all, because it's not going to cool efficiently if the copper and the thermal pads are not making clean contact on the components directly, not on old thermal grease. That's a bad idea. If you're going to do all this, do it right. It takes longer, but it's worth it in the long run. So there's the graphics chip, if anyone's curious, CPU, and I believe the South Bridge. So again, keep it covered this whole time. We're going to go ahead and take that off. There's the pads, and there's your connector again. Double check everything. Place it on there. Plug it in is what I prefer to do. And then you can start putting your clamps back in, as well, as the bottom clamps, the top clamps, as well as the 4 screws for the CPU. Now, you'll notice here that in this picture, you can see some of the chips here, and you can see this capacitor on the right. The heatsink is in line with it. You need to actually undo this if you made the same mistake. I had to take it in my hands and actually pull this portion down away from the fan to actually get it to fit correctly over those chips. So you actually see how it's pulled down further. You want to do that. It depends on, if you do this, or if you're following this maybe for another laptop for the main idea. It depends if you have to do that or not. But once you've done that, put all those clips back in, put all the screws back in, put your Wi-Fi back underneath everything as it was. Tighten those screws in an X pattern again, not too tight because you don't want to damage the CPU. Same thing with these clips. Put the speaker and the other connectors back in. Put the CMOS battery in at that point. Route the speaker over the other. You don't want those cables hitting the heat sink because they don't have any kind of thermal shielding on them. There, we pop the battery back in, pop the keyboard back in, the bezel on the bottom, battery, and then you want to plug that thing in and make sure you get a battery icon and make sure you get AC is all good from the system on it. Once you do, though, start it up, and because we removed the CMOS battery, the NVRAM lost the time settings. That's one of the things it keeps. We want to reset that because it's not 1988, it's 2021. So we're going to go ahead and reset that, and as we did, save those settings. And now in FreeBSD, and if you want to see this, do sysctl space -a and do pipe and grep for temp. You may want to use a -i so it's case insensitive. But now, this is the same workload with VirtualBox, 2 VMs, Firefox with 4 tabs and all of that. And now we only get a max of 59 degrees centigrade and 60. And it idles at about 49 to 48 degrees centigrade. So this is why a good cooling system is very important in your laptop. I don't care if it's old or new or whatever, how long you hang on to it. You want to keep things running well. It's a lot cooler on the lap now. It doesn't get burning hot. The fan is not horribly sounding. It's nice and smooth. So, but this is how you do it. And I hope if you have a project similar that you may want to do, I hope it kind of helps you. The analogy about the car's radiator and all that. But as always, I really hope you enjoyed this video. I do hope it helped you. This is Tyler with T-Tech, as always. And thank you for viewing, and have a very nice day.